Midnight again, the hour when the world quiets and the ghosts of history start to whisper. Each story told here is more than crime. It's about the people who chose darkness when light was still within reach. And tonight, we walk alongside one of the most chilling minds the world has ever known. This is Midnight Crimes, the story of Ted Bundy. Before he became a monster, Ted Bundy was a boy, intelligent, well-mannered, and loved by many. Born in 1946 in Burlington, Vermont, he was raised in a web of lies. His mother, Eleanor Louise Cowell, was unmarried, and unmarried mothers were heavily stigmatized then. To protect the family's reputation, Bundy was told his mother was his sister, and his grandparents, strict and deeply religious, became his parents. His grandfather, Samuel Cowell, was known for bursts of violence and anger. He beat animals, yelled at neighbors, and ruled the household through fear. There are stories of Bundy watching in silence, never flinching, never reacting, while learning that dominance gets results. When Louise later moved to Washington State and revealed the truth to Ted, something inside him fractured. He felt betrayed, as though the entire world had conspired to deceive him. In interviews years later, Bundy described feeling like a stranger to himself. It was the beginning of a lifelong performance. In Seattle, Bundy built a new life. He was bright, sociable, and oddly disciplined. He majored in psychology at the University of Washington, earning praise for his insight into human behavior. He had friends, girlfriends, ambitions. He spoke of law school, politics, and power. He volunteered for Seattle's Republican Party and even worked briefly at a crisis hotline center, talking strangers out of suicide. But behind that composed voice, Bundy was practicing a role, the role of someone trustworthy. Psychologists later called it masking empathy. He learned to imitate emotion, not feel it. Bundy's relationship with a wealthy girlfriend, often referred to by the pseudonym Stephanie Brooks, changed everything. When she broke off the relationship, describing him as emotionally cold and aimless, Bundy became obsessed. He worked to rebuild himself, studying harder, dressing sharper, joining political campaigns, all to prove he could win her back. And he did. But once she was back in his life, he abandoned her, abruptly, without explanation. It wasn't love he sought, it was control, and now he'd learned how intoxicating that power could be. By the mid-1970s, young women began vanishing around the Pacific Northwest. Each case eerily similar, each victim young, educated, independent, the same type Bundy was drawn to. He perfected a method, a fake cast or sling, a story about dropping his books or loading a sailboat. He'd ask for help. Soft voice, polite smile, total innocence. And once the victim stepped close enough, the mask fell. Police were baffled. Witnesses described a polite man named Ted driving a tan Volkswagen Beetle. But Ted Bundy looked nothing like a suspect. He worked in political offices and even studied law. He attended meetings where detectives discussed the very task force investigating him. Every move a step ahead. Bundy's crimes were never just about killing. They were about owning. He revisited the site, sometimes days later, sometimes weeks, returning to the places where his control had been complete. FBI profiler John Douglas would later say Bundy's motivation was possession through dominance. Each act was a twisted assertion of superiority. Bundy photographed his victims. He kept their belongings. Souvenirs, he called them. Tokens to relive moments where he felt completely powerful. The contrast was terrifying. A man so polished, so articulate, capable of deep cruelty, and capable of switching back to charm within moments. The hunt intensifies. By late 1974, the disappearances spread from Washington to Oregon, and then to Utah and Colorado. The list of missing women grew longer. Detectives began connecting the dots, each victim last seen with a man named Ted. Bundy was eventually pulled over by police in Utah in 1975. Inside his Volkswagen Beetle, they found handcuffs, rope, ski masks, a crowbar, and an ice pick. He called them tools for burglary, but investigators already suspected something worse. He was charged and convicted, first for kidnapping, then linked to murder cases in Colorado. He was imprisoned, temporarily. In 1977, Bundy represented himself in court, charming judges and flirting with female reporters. During a court recess in Colorado, he simply jumped out a second-story window and vanished into the mountains. He survived on stolen food and clothes before being caught again. But his confidence only grew. Months later, in a high-security jail, Bundy lost weight, loosened ceiling tiles, and squeezed through the small opening above his cell. He walked into freedom once more. The man America had come to fear was now on the run, smiling all the while. After his second escape, Bundy fled to Florida, adopting false names, blending into college towns. But something inside him was unraveling. The control that once defined him was slipping away. And when he lost control, the violence became chaotic. On January 15th, 1978, he broke into the Chi Omega sorority house at Florida State University. Within minutes, 2 young women were dead, 2 more severely injured. He fled, only to attack again days later. His final victim, 12-year-old Kimberly Leach, was abducted from her school. It was a senseless, desperate act, one that finally led police straight to him. Bundy was arrested driving a stolen car. Inside were fake IDs, stolen credit cards, and a grin that never left his face. The Florida trial of Ted Bundy was one of the first fully televised in U.S. history. Millions watched as Bundy played the role of his own defense attorney, questioning witnesses, flirting with reporters, even announcing surprise marriages on the courtroom floor. To many observers, it looked like theater, but for Bundy, it was another chance to control the narrative, to make people watch him on his terms. He was found guilty on all counts and sentenced to death in 1979. But for nearly a decade, he delayed execution, filing appeals, giving interviews, and savoring the attention of journalists who wanted to understand the real Bundy. Psychiatrists who interviewed Bundy described him as a textbook psychopath, intelligent, persuasive, lacking any genuine empathy. He spoke about his crimes in detached, third-person language, as if narrating someone else's story. In his final interviews, Bundy claimed that violent pornography had warped his mind. Experts dismissed this as manipulation, another attempt to rationalize what he could not feel. Bundy wasn't searching for excuses. He was searching for control, even over his own legacy. On January 24th, 1989, at 7:16 a.m., Ted Bundy was executed in the Florida State Prison's electric chair. Outside, a crowd of over 2,000 celebrated. Some cheered, some danced. Some sold T-shirts reading, "Burn Bundy, burn." Inside, witnesses said he showed no emotion, no remorse. He looked calm, as if he'd already accepted the end of his performance. When the switch was pulled, the monster who had hidden in plain sight was finally gone, but the questions he left behind remain. Ted Bundy changed how the world understood serial killers. Before him, many believed evil was obvious, angry, violent, visible. Bundy proved that evil can smile, blend in, wear a suit, and speak kindly. He became a case study for criminologists and psychologists alike, inspiring new terms like organized offender, a person whose careful planning hides monstrous acts. Even now, decades later, documentaries, books, and films continue to revisit his story, not out of fascination, but out of fear that someone like him could walk among us again. Because Bundy's greatest weapon wasn't the murder weapon. It was his normalcy. The mask of the man next door. In the dark hours of the night, his story becomes more than a record of crimes. It's a reflection of what humans are capable of, both in deception and in belief. We trusted him because we wanted to believe monsters don't look like us. But they can. And that's why his story still echoes through the silence of midnight. This has been Midnight Crimes, the story of Ted Bundy. Sleep softly. And remember, the scariest faces are sometimes the ones that smile back.